By the age of 32, Alexander of Macedon had conquered an empire stretching from Greece and Egypt to the edge of India. No surviving source records him losing a major battle, and his name became one of the most famous in military history. But his victories were not magic. They came from training, discipline, intelligence, speed, and a willingness to take enormous risks. To understand how he achieved so much, we have to begin in Macedon, the kingdom that shaped him from birth. Alexander was born in 356 BCE to King Philip II and Queen Olympias, inside a court filled with ambition and danger. Macedon was once viewed as peripheral by many Greek city-states, but under Philip, it was becoming the strongest power in the region. Philip transformed the army through relentless reform. He trained infantry to fight in dense formations with the long sarissa pike. He also built an elite cavalry arm, improved siege warfare, and turned Macedon into a machine built for conquest. Alexander grew up in this atmosphere of war, planning, and royal competition, where command was not an idea, but a way of life. Ancient tradition links his education to Aristotle, whose teaching exposed him to literature, philosophy, science, and politics. But books were only part of his formation. He was trained to ride, hunt, fight, judge character, and lead men in the field. One famous story tells of him taming the horse Bucephalus, a symbol of the confidence and force of will he carried into adulthood. By the age of 16, he was trusted to govern in Philip's absence, showing that he was already being prepared for power. Not long after, he fought at Chaeronea, where Philip defeated the allied forces of Athens and Thebes in 338 BCE. Alexander helped command the decisive assault, likely leading the companion cavalry in one of the most important battles of his youth. The Macedonian victory broke organized Greek resistance and secured Philip's control over most of Greece. Philip then prepared for his greatest project yet, an invasion of the Persian Empire, the superpower of the age. But in 336 BCE, Philip was assassinated, and the entire future of Macedon suddenly rested on his 20-year-old son. Alexander inherited prestige, but he also inherited danger. Rivals, rebels, and uncertain allies waited to test the new king. He responded with speed. First, he secured the throne. Then he moved north and crushed opposition among frontier peoples. His rapid early campaigns sent a message that Macedon had not weakened with Philip's death. If anything, it had grown more dangerous. When the Greek city of Thebes revolted, Alexander marched south with astonishing speed before his enemies believed he could arrive. Thebes was destroyed, and the shock spread across the Greek world. Other cities quickly reconsidered resistance. With Greece subdued, Alexander took command of the campaign his father had planned, the invasion of Persia. In 334 BCE, he crossed the Hellespont into Asia with a relatively small but highly professional army. His army centered on the phalanx, but it also included elite cavalry, light troops, engineers, and experienced officers. Legend says Alexander visited the site of Troy, linking himself to heroic tradition before beginning his Asian campaign. The Persians first tried to stop him at the Granicus River, where cavalry lined the far bank to block the crossing. Many commanders would have delayed. Alexander attacked at once, leading from the front into the current. The crossing was dangerous. Horses struggled in the water, formations broke, and the climb up the far bank was chaotic. But Alexander's aggression succeeded. Once his men gained a foothold, the battle swung in Macedon's favor. The victory at Granicus shattered the first Persian field army and opened Western Asia Minor to him. Just as important, it proved to his soldiers that he would share danger with them instead of commanding safely from the rear. After Granicus, city after city opened its gates, was taken by force, or was reorganized under Macedonian control. Alexander also moved along the coast because he understood that Persian naval power depended on access to major ports. If he captured the ports, the Persian navy would lose the bases it needed to dominate the eastern Mediterranean. His campaign was not only about winning battles, it was about dismantling the strategic system that supported Persian power. At Gordium, later tradition placed him before the famous knot that supposedly no one could untie. Whether he cut it or solved it another way, The story mattered because it portrayed him as a man who broke limits by force of will. In 333 BCE, the Persian king Darius III personally led a great army to stop him near Issus. The field at Issus was narrow, trapped between mountains and the sea, reducing the advantage of Persian numbers. Alexander recognized the opportunity and concentrated his strongest attack where he could strike the Persian center. As the battle developed, he led a direct assault toward the position of Darius himself. Once Darius fled, the Persian army began to collapse. In ancient battle, the courage of the king shaped the courage of the whole line. The result was another great victory. Darius escaped, but his family and royal camp fell into Alexander's hands. Alexander treated Darius's family with respect, an act that served both personal image and political calculation. After Issus, he did not simply chase Darius. Instead, he continued his coastal strategy and turned south toward Phoenicia. One city above all resisted him: Tyre, the great island fortress that refused to submit. Tyre was protected by water and heavy defenses. A normal siege would not easily bring it down. Alexander answered with engineering. He ordered a causeway built out into the sea toward the island. The work was brutal and slow. Tyrian defenders attacked it. Storms damaged it, and the sea itself became part of the battle. Alexander expanded the siege with ships, towers, and siege engines until land and sea were both brought to bear on the city. After 7 months, Tyre fell. The siege showed that Alexander could defeat fortresses as well as armies. He then moved south again and eventually entered Egypt, where Persian authority collapsed with little resistance. In Egypt, he was accepted as pharaoh, allowing him to present himself not only as conqueror, but as legitimate ruler. He also founded Alexandria, near the Mediterranean coast, a city destined to become one of the ancient world's greatest centers. Alexandria would outlive him by centuries, spreading Greek culture while absorbing Egyptian and wider Mediterranean influences. Some traditions also place Alexander at the Oracle of Siwa, where religion and kingship became part of his growing legend. But the war with Persia was not over. In 331 BCE, he marched east again for the decisive campaign against Darius. Darius assembled another massive army near Gaugamela, on ground prepared for cavalry and scythed chariots. The Persians hoped their numbers and open ground would allow them to surround Alexander's smaller force. Alexander responded with one of his most famous battlefield maneuvers. He advanced diagonally across the plain. This movement pulled Persian cavalry outward and slowly created a gap where the center became vulnerable. At the right moment, Alexander formed a wedge with the companion cavalry and drove straight toward Darius. It was a moment of speed, nerve, and precision. If it failed, the whole battle might collapse around him. Once again, Darius fled, and once again the Persian army lost coherence. Gaugamela broke imperial resistance in the field. After Gaugamela, the great cities of the empire lay open: Babylon, Susa, and the old Persian heartland. At Susa and elsewhere, he seized enormous royal treasuries, giving him wealth on a scale few rulers had ever controlled. He then entered Persepolis, the ceremonial center of the Achaemenid dynasty, filled with symbols of imperial power. Parts of Persepolis were later burned. Whether revenge, theater, drunken impulse, or all three, the act became part of his legend. Darius fled east, but was eventually killed by his own followers before Alexander could capture him alive. With Darius dead, Alexander began presenting himself as the legitimate successor to the Persian kings. That decision brought opportunity and tension. He needed local elites, but some Macedonians feared he was changing too much. The conquest now moved into Bactria and Sogdia, where mountain warfare and regional resistance replaced decisive open battle. Here, Alexander faced guerrilla-style resistance, harsh terrain, long supply lines, and an enemy harder to pin down. He answered by founding settlements, leaving garrisons, and weaving administration into the landscape of conquest. He also married Roxana, linking himself to local elites while symbolizing a broader fusion between rulers and conquered peoples. From there, he pushed toward the Indian subcontinent, extending his campaign farther east than any Greek or Macedonian king before him. In 326 BCE, he met King Porus at the Hydaspes River, where a new challenge awaited him: war elephants. The river crossing itself required deception. Alexander moved upstream at night and used weather and misdirection to mask the operation. Porus was forced to respond, and once the battle formed, the elephants became both a weapon and a terror. The elephants disrupted formations and frightened horses, making Hydaspes one of Alexander's hardest-fought victories. Even so, Alexander adapted, used maneuver, and eventually defeated Porus in another hard, costly battle. Afterward, he treated Porus with respect and restored him as a ruler, choosing cooperation over destruction. Alexander wanted to continue deeper into India, but by then his army had marched and fought for years without pause. At the Hyphasis River, the veterans refused to go farther. They had reached the limit of endurance and ambition. This was one battle Alexander could not win. He argued, waited, and finally accepted the refusal of his own army. The return journey was no triumph. It brought fresh fighting, severe losses, and the disaster of the Gedrosian desert. Men and animals died from thirst and exhaustion. The hardships of the return matched the glories of conquest with a darker reality. When Alexander reached Babylon in 323 BCE, he was still planning new campaigns, but time was running out. He fell ill and died at only 32, leaving behind no clear adult heir capable of controlling the empire alone. After his death, his generals divided the empire, creating rival kingdoms that fought each other for decades. Politically, the empire did not survive him in one piece. That was one of the greatest weaknesses of his achievement. Yet culturally, his conquests reshaped the ancient world by spreading Greek language, art, trade, and institutions across vast distances. His success in war came from more than courage. He combined phalanx pressure, cavalry shock, reconnaissance, logistics, and engineering. That is why Alexander remains more than a conqueror. He stands as one of history's most complete battlefield commanders, even if the empire he forged outlived him only in fragments. If you enjoyed this journey through history, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and join us for the next story that changed the world.